My friend Ethan has been involved in game development for a long time and has been very active in the Sydney development scene. They're currently the creative director of MI Studios, which is working on Faster and a few other projects. You can also catch them on Twitch and Twitter under the name Voxel Vagrant, where they do some fantastic art streams and tutorials in Unreal. We both work in gaming NFTs now, but neither of us are interested in the stuff that usually gets talked about, like investment, scarcity, ownership. Rather, we're more interested in how the tech can help out with things like storytelling and game design. So that's what we wanted to focus on, and I hope you enjoy.
I think what you're starting to do here might actually be the way to go in terms of just having some open and frank conversations with developers about what they're thinking about doing with it, and how they can potentially use it. That is like, this isn't corporate. This isn't dystopian. This is just, some nerds talking about something that's going to be really cool. And if we can sort of change, I guess, the visual culture of it, and own it as an indie game thing, take that over a bit, then that might actually help attract other game developers, and just make it a bit easier to have conversations with game developers about this. Like, we just have to change the culture around it. Take the suit off.
That's a big part of it. Like I think and there's two different aspects of it. Like, inevitably when I talk to people about cross game items and stuff like that, they ask similar questions like, why would a game dev put the effort in to recognize the items from other games? And I usually have two answers to that. One is more of a marketing thing, like instantly getting a user base down towards the bottom of the funnel and emotionally invested, which is more of a marketing answer. But the other answer is just because it's neat.
It's
And
cool.
yeah,
It's just actually kind of cool.
yeah, like my sort of game design brain kind of thinks of all the neat things that you could do if IP was just developed openly. Um, and yeah, they don't think it's neat. That's the hard part. That's the disconnect. Is like they haven't seen the neat part yet.
Okay, well, they don't think it's neat yet. So basically, all you need is effectively you need a couple of games to do really well and make it big, and then everyone's going to think it's neat because they're doing it, and it's incredibly popular. So it's not going to be neat until literally somebody proves the model, and then everyone's going to want a piece of it. But like this idea that like anyone who read Ted Williams' Other Lands series, and you had the notion of being able to take like your character from one world into another, and be able to defeat a creature in one world, and this artifact that you had gotten, if you take it into the main world, it becomes something else, but it's reminiscent of it. Like it's a yellow feather might become a piece of gold, or like you have sort of like these reminiscent elements of it. Tactically, as a player, if I had a series of games where in one world of I have these like little pets that I can raise and breed and trade, and they're really cute, and they get like played on my phone, and it's adorable. And then that same pet in a larger open world dark fantasy is actually this like monstrosity that rips through things. This idea that tactically I could develop something in one world or another, or I can use this cutesy game to basically come around somebody in the main world and get them from a perspective that they weren't considering. As a player, I fucking love that. Like that's cool stuff. And when I first heard about this, like when I first heard about a lot of this stuff years and years and years ago, immediately I was like, oh man, I want a metaverse where I buy up all my favorite games as a kid. I want EverQuest right here, and I want some Dungeons and Dragons games over here, and I want Lara Croft over there, and I want to be able to go traverse in between them and take Lara Croft into fucking EverQuest. But it's cool stuff. It's really, really cool stuff. We just need developers who want help. Like they want help developing games. They want to be able to help just like share assets and share the burden of making game design really freaking cool for players, and taking that question of how do you make a game that is enriching and has replayability and people want to come back to it. Well, what if they want to come back to it because they want to mine that game for assets to use in another game? And then by working with another developer to create this ecosystem of assets between your titles, you're sharing users. Like you're sharing an audience, you're sharing a user base. It's the little guy saying, hey, I've got 100,000 users, and this other guy saying, I have 20,000 users. And if we create this sort of free flow of assets between our games, between us, we now have 200, 300,000 users. It's a way of building up a larger audience than one developer can ever do on their own.
Yeah, yeah. You just gave me so many jumping off points, and that's a really interesting literary reference as well. I'll definitely want to check that out. Do you mind if I just pause
Yeah,
just for a sec? Someone's at my door. I just need
go
to
for
go
it.
let them in. It's almost like we have an even tougher job than, because I mean, obviously every tech platform, there's been people that have been aware that the tech was cool, but they didn't have the killer app yet. Whether it's actual technology, or whether it's like a business model like free to play, and League of Legends was kind of the first to really crack that one and give people an example of like, okay, I can see it now.
Mm,
But it's even tougher for us, I think, because we depend on not just one killer app, because by definition it depends on other games. So it's almost like we need a
precisely.
killer
You
ecosystem.
need a kill. That's precisely
Um,
it. You need a killer ecosystem. You need a
yeah,
killer group of, okay. All right. So what you need is you need the drum and bass scene in the games industry. You need all of
here we go. Now you're
these.
talking my language.
Yeah, right, right. I'm working this one. I'm gonna take this metaphor as far as I can before it
Here we
falls
go.
over. So what I've been seeing on Twitch, which is really interesting ecosystem that's developing, that wherein you've got a drum and bass DJ who he's got his viewer base. He's been DJing for hours and hours and hours. He's got like 300, 400 followers, and he's wrapping up. And he goes, okay, cool. What other drum and bass musician is on it is on right now? Oh, this guy is really, I've met him once or twice. He's really cool. He's only got 5 viewers. I'm gonna go rate him. And so you've got this aspect where they're all rating each other, they're all bringing each other audience. There's this like real sort of my audience, your audience, I support you, you support me. And then, but you also see, like, as I'm always I'm listening to these while I'm working on games, you'll always see different DJs jumping in each other's streams and throwing money and bitcoins and shout outs, and basically starting to try and hype. They start trying to hype up the audience of the other DJ until you get some sort of hype train going, and then raises a bunch of money for that person. So there's this ecosystem where all these DJs are now supporting each other, and they're able to do this full time. They don't have jobs anymore. They've quit their day jobs and now able to DJ completely 100% off of the back of each other's efforts to both excite and catalyze and antagonize each other's audiences towards good things, but also share those audiences around. So we almost need that kind of cultural shift, cultural mindset happening between a few devs. And you don't need many. You only need a handful of developers who respect each other. That's going to be huge. They have to respect each other enough to open their pipeline and open their code up to someone else. So they respect each other. They believe in the integrity and the validity of each other's game design. None of them are going to be bad mouthing any of the others in this cohort, behind the scenes or after work drinks or whatever. And they're all sort of a similar caliber and quality. It's like what the indie game scene had back in 2008, 2009, where you had a lot of developers who used to work for huge studios, now turned independent. Most of them knew each other. They were sharing ideas in that first wave of indie games. A lot of them, it was a known circle of people who all kind of egged each other on and collaborated and supported each other. So when you find that, when you've got that, and you can help support that happening, I reckon you're going to get the ecosystem you're talking about.
Yeah, it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, because it's very similar to what happens in real life as well with the DJs and supporting each other. It's kind of like etiquette to, if you're
Mm.
playing on a night, to show up for the other DJs and be up at the front, hyping up the crowd as well. So it's kind of like the digital representation of
Oh,
that.
100%,
And
totally.
yeah, it can be the same with game devs as well, just support being bi-directional. And if in this sort of like cross game item space, like whether you are using someone else's item or letting them use yours, it's still sort of like a bi-directional flow of support and I don't know what the word is, but like marketing juice, like interest and
Yeah.
emotional investment. I naturally am emotionally invested because I've spent so much time.
Yeah.
And here's another game that's going to respect that time.
Oh,
And even though we
very
don't
much
have
so.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 you're absolutely right. It's that what you just said. So sorry to interrupt you, but that respecting a player's time is huge. That's incredible. The games that can actually codify that into their game design, like the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours people invest into these games. I interrupted you. Do
Mm.
please go on.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and we've seen a bit of a trend towards like if you look at what gamers prefer and what games writers are talking about, I think there's been a trend in the last even 10 years of preferring games that do respect our time. You see games like Journey and Braid winning Game of the Year, and people actually appreciating that the experience is 3 hours as opposed to 50 hours,
Yeah.
getting that experience that you can really talk about a lot, talk about with your friends within a small time frame because gamers are growing up, and we have less time. But even though we don't have that sort of killer ecosystem at the moment, I think there's still like this sort of, I don't know, I guess metaverse, if you want to use that word, but this grab bag, if you will, of open IP
Yeah.
has already started to be built. And I don't just mean like in a gaming or metaverse context. I just mean like in like a open source fiction kind of context, or like even memes. Like nobody owns a meme,
Yeah.
or like if you take like creepy pasta, or like I don't know if you have seen like SCP Secret Laboratory, like it's like kind of like an open source fiction that anyone can add to,
Oh, cool.
but that kind of like open IP that anyone can take from, like someone made here's a great example. Someone made a Slenderman game,
Mm,
and who owns Slenderman? Like anybody can do that.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's so you what you're saying almost is like you almost just need somebody to kind of pick up and run with it. So you can have an individual maybe prowl this library of what is already currently out there, and just start spawning off ideas. Coming up with IP doesn't have to be so hard when you have so much, you've got so much open source canon to play with and be able to spin together. And also the ecosystem, I think, could potentially be done with by one developer as well. It doesn't necessarily need to be a cohort of developers all working in tandem. You could have one developer who all their games have free flow assets between them. Or so yeah, so trying to think of different ways that maybe some of this stuff can be I guess some of this stuff can encourage ecosystem without necessarily people behaving well, without having to depend on a couple of developers getting along really, really well. Like maybe you can have assets that want to be picked up. Like,
Oh yeah.
can Engine have a library of open source or of assets which are blockchain and ready to be picked up by creators, whether they're writers or game developers, etc. And they're like sticky. They want to be. It's like good plot wants to be picked up. A secret wants
Mm.
to be shared. Like it wants to be distributed. It wants to be picked up and run with. So you can pick it up. You can integrate it into your game, but then someone else can also pick it up and integrate it in a different way. And it's like by the nature of that token, it's going to keep all that data. What would be interesting is if it could start behaving differently in your game than you had
Oh
necessarily
yeah.
intended. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of storytelling aspect of it and how it affects the things that you bring along, whether it's like a character or something else like a story, a history. I think that's really interesting. I kind of push a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't even mind if we got in the business of contributing to that and making some of that ourselves. But I think other people are like they're making contributions to that even if they're not making a game. Like I don't know if you've seen the Loot Project. People have called it kind of like the reverse NFT or the anti NFT, because instead of providing an image and letting other people decide its attributes, it provides the attributes and lets other people decide the image.
Oh, interesting.
And like other people call that the reverse NFT, but for me, this is what it was going to be all along.
Yeah.
Like this is always what I was imagining where the NFT itself is just words. It's like, silver helmet and things like that. And then how
Yeah.
you interpret it is up to you. And I think that, like, as more and more people use it, like if you take an example like fan fiction, like some fan fiction can be so good that it becomes headcanon for people.
Yeah.
And some fan fiction is so poor that it becomes completely forgettable. And sort of like the quality rises to the top, and after a while, the headcanon becomes like almost like canon.
Yep.
And I envision this as being sort of similar in that, like, people will take and then they'll build on what came before, and eventually the best sort of quality stuff, more people will have played it and used it,
Yeah.
therefore it becomes headcanon. And God help me for using this term that I just made up, but it could become sort of like a decentralized canon. Oh my God, I did it. I'm so sorry to everyone, but
You found a way. We're gonna decorporatize this shit, man. Like it's we're absolutely gonna take the pinstripes off of it all. Well, it's so when I was very first looking up, because I remember coming across Engine quite a few years ago and getting really grumpy. It wasn't available for Unreal Engine yet. And so of course I started looking into Ethereum for Unreal Engine that wasn't Engine. And you've got there was a coder, Ruslan Nazarov, who created Etherlinker for Unreal Engine back in 2019, which has nothing to do with trading cards. Like it's all about Ethereum and using using your contracts to have unique items, unique pets, different ways to sort of create and track unique things within your game ecosystem. But what you're saying in terms of like, it doesn't need to be art, it doesn't need to have a physical asset. It's actually just data at the end of the day. It's just a name with an ID, and it's the ability to call that. Does this exist? Who owns it? Who owned it last? Where is it right now? It's that ability to make a direct connection to it that has nothing to do with anything else. To be able to make a change to it and have it be able to make changes. And like what we're describing there, you could have blockchain Ethereum be your spell system. That's luck in a game, or a curse. Like a good classic sort of Eastern European curse lands on one person and it jumps from one person to the other and it remembers who it had affected last. And if you
oh,
have
that's
that
amazing.
curse, you've got that curse, it's going to affect your gameplay in a way that is completely unique to anything else you've experienced.
I'm having a
But
flashback to what was that World of Warcraft event with was it the Blood Plague
yeah, the blood
that
plague.
spread from person to person? Yeah.
Totally. And exactly that. And you've got this curse, and now you want to pass it on to somebody else. And it's going to have a record of everyone who it's cursed and where it goes from there. So
I would love to see experimentation like that.
there are systems where that have nothing to do with assets. That's just data,
Oh yeah.
which could be so
Yeah, I mean,
cool.
assets, the images, like images, audio, video, it's all too expensive to store on chain. So I think that's the thing that a lot of I've seen some data suggesting that game devs are about 50-50 with regards to like whether they're cool to try out NFTs or whether they're
Yeah.
um, sort of really skeptical due
So
to
I'm going to 1 second
parent
pause
stuff.
this. There's a
Yeah,
tiny,
that's
tiny
cool.
child. Just
Yeah.
1 second. I think it ended up working out really well because again, both of us here are talking about NFT, about blockchain, and we're talking about Ethereum, and we're talking about these things in a non-trading card way, in a non-loot box
Yeah.
way, in a non it's we're not just talking about it as a way of getting coins from players. We're talking about it in terms of how can it affect the player's experience? Can it affect it differently game to game? Like how would we do this? What's the ecosystem around it? We're talking about things that potentially might never make us money ever. They're just
Oh yeah.
really cool and fun for the player. So I think we're both in the correct place. We wouldn't be allowed to talk about this if we were.
Oh, of course not. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely happy with how it all worked out, and yeah, I'm personally a lot more jazzed by like, I mean, yeah, like I said, I think they're a good company. Um, but yeah, like the thing that sort of gets me excited is more like the possibility of, like, one of the things I had in my head, and it's an idea that will make me absolutely no money at all. It's just the sort of thing that you might just bash out in a jam or something, or maybe it takes a little longer than that, but you just sort of give it to the world and say, hey, take it and do what you will. And I was thinking about making kind of like a story based, like, piece of short fiction that was choose your own adventure and involved a lot of decisions. And at the end of it, maybe it uses twine or something like that, just something really basic. And then at the end of it, it would mint an NFT that would be a character for you that you could take into any different world, but it would be like the full gamut of what makes up that character. So, like, we're talking like physical attributes, Myers Briggs, philosophical stances,
Yeah.
trauma, like everything that makes up a person. And then, like, any game that wants to plug into any of those attributes, essentially they would just be key value pairs. And you would have like historical strings of text,
Yeah.
but just a lot of key value pairs. And any game that wanted to plug into it, cool.
Well, that's it. That's like, again, what you're saying is it's all data sets, and it's all how you set up your data tables to link together, and make suggestive of like this Myers-Briggs personality type is then attracted to these kinds of goals and quests and things, and they're afraid of these things, and they're likely to have those resources, and you can totally generate ideas from that. I've wanted to always do a sticky story kind of blockchain thing, which is so riffing off what you're saying, it's kind of a similar idea in Species, where I love the idea of plot points, wanting to exist and being and generating story around it. So, say for example, the young boy in a small village who finds an old sword with an engraving in a box underneath his father's bed. This is a cool sword, straps it onto his back. I'm going out adventuring and doing it. I'm an adventurer. I'm gonna see, and it's he's just a kid. He's just a kid. He's playing in the mountains, flinging his sword at trees, making up believe stories. The moment that sword enters a player's hands as a sticky item, we're calling this a sticky plot point that wants to exist in the world. It starts minting out characters that want to find it. You're going to have the guy who lost the sword. You're going to have the sorcerer who originally imbued the sword with evil powers and wants to get it back. You're going to have the good guys who want to destroy the current owner of the sword because they can't let that sword come into its own again and threaten humanity. So the moment that sword enters someone's hands, it starts creating the characters in the world that are going to come try and find it and try and reclaim it. And each of those characters, and they exist, they're unique entities. They exist until they die and get taken out. So they're now, it is now generating and minting out things to come back at it to make story happen. And you might not encounter one of them ever. You might encounter this wizard in another continent. You might encounter the church. Maybe you start getting text messages. Maybe you start getting some cross-platform text messages going, "We know you have the sword."
Yeah.
So
Maybe that'll be your reminder to jump back in the game, right? Like, hey, you've been 24 hours without our game. We know you have the sword.
We know you've got it.
We're coming for you.
And it starts sending messages out to other players as well. So an epic item has entered play, the field of play, and so it starts becoming, if you've got story attracted to you, you've got more opportunities. So that's similar vein. I love the idea of something that generates characters and generates plot and generates things to return to the player and combat the player anywhere they might be at any time.
Yeah, and I guess it's all just code that can be based on different conditions, right?
It's just
So,
data,
like,
yeah.
if it wants to, like, it can be a unique experience for every person who picks up that sword according to the conditions that they picked it up in,
Totally.
and the conditions of the wider world at that time, even the virtual world as well as the real world, and how many other people there are with a sword like that. There's so many things that you can take into account with that. That's why I get a little, like, when people say, I've had people tell me, oh, this technology can only be loot boxes, or this technology can only be JPEGs stored off chain. And to think it is only what you see in front of you is a poverty of imagination.
Oh,
It's like,
absolutely.
yeah, I love hearing ideas like that. I wanted to get, that's what I actually really wanted to get into, is just like, what is Ethan's,
Yeah.
where does Ethan's mind go with, given this tool, like if Ethan was in a cabin in the woods for 6 months,
What
what
would I be allowed
game
to
would
do?
sort of emerge at the end of that? Yeah.
What would emerge at the end of it, do you reckon? Hello, hello. Well, it would definitely what would emerge at the end of it would be something that creates that sense of mystery and adventure, and I guess and a living world. For me, it's about living worlds. It's always about generative content and living worlds, which has always been what excites me. But then there's this idea that you could potentially listen to a song, and the fact that that song was played when you passed through that hallway is the data that's recorded, and that's the thing that gets minted. And the fact that you just listen to that thing, so now you don't even know that you are carrying with you a non-fungible token, which is now
Yeah.
attached itself to your character and to your profile, and is now maybe going to start eliciting other audio tropes or other similar ideas. So I think there's a lot of potential towards creating the conditions for interesting life, interesting stories, and interesting things to happen. It's all possibility. We're designing possibilities. We're working within possibility and probability, and we're saying that if these conditions are met, these things might happen. And that just creates that's just cool to me. I love
Yeah.
art that gets away from you.
Yeah. Like, and if something like, a song playing at a particular point in time, like whether it's a joyful point in time or a traumatic point in time,
Mm,
will have a large effect on that character. And like, if this were a movie, you know, the song playing at that high consequence point in time would then be the sort of backdrop music for important points later in the movie,
absolutely.
artistically done. And but this is something that I guess with this technology you can kind of create somewhat organically. There's always a degree of giving up control when you try to create
Yes.
something organic like that. But it's not limited to the one game this time. Like if it's in your wallet, um, you know, you can have a, depending on what the developer of the future projects, what level of integration they decide to go for, whether it's a full reimagining of what that is in their game, or whether it's just a throwaway dialogue option. Like, one NPC says, "Say no more, sir. You have the
Yeah.
look about you of someone who fought the Black Dragon and lived.
Exactly.
I know the look well." Yeah.
Yeah. I would absolutely love that. It's, we when we're talking about these games, we're not the character we're playing. We're not the character they designed for us to play. We are ourselves. We talk about the experience in terms of like, did you see me do that? Did you see me kill that black dragon? That was fucking epic, man. But like it's we are the number one avatar for all of the games that we play. And so what we're talking about is we're designing things that are, we're designing experiences that are connected to us and the avatar, and not just locked into one ecosystem. I, as a developer, would love to go dial into Engine or whoever has this library and go, okay, cool. What are the tokens that exist now? What tokens exist that didn't exist before? What has started generating? And then you've got owned tokens. So these developers I can contact and go like, oh, I really want to use your Black Dragon tooth because I think that's really cool. It fits with my game. Can I like how can I use that, and what do we need to do to make that happen? But then I'd also love to see the ownerless tokens, the ones that spawn themselves, like what we were talking about with sticky stories and things that, the moment it gets picked up, it mints out a character to come after it. Like I want to see a list of those characters and start implementing them in my game as well. So like that kind of
Yeah.
ecosystem for a developer is gold, absolute gold. We're talking about like, it's like the Unreal Marketplace, but for ideas.
Whoa. Can we steal that as a marketing term? We'll we'll mint an NFT to make sure you get paid royalties every time we use it as like a tagline.
Oh man.
I know you've been digging around in the tools, um, and we have like from what I understand, there's like a lot of stuff's on hold at the moment because there's a new version of the tools coming out. But did that give you did that get the gears turning at all? Like as you were digging around the tools as to what might be possible?
Well, mostly in terms of it was really silly just thinking about just the like the graph user interface and just the being able to call data, just the description of the like visual tool set for making queries for calling data. That's really what has got me thinking about like, oh man, this is just IDs. This is just IDs
Yeah.
that are enacting these IDs can enact a contract. Yeah, and that's contracts are really interesting. And people have covered that in great detail, and they'll cover that in great detail more. But I mean, what we're talking about is we're talking about data and storing data tables. Because as I understand it, blockchain can't really you don't really want to store a character with all its 3D assets on there. You want to store
No, yeah.
just store information. And for me, that's the really cool stuff when you start thinking about, well, how can you use information in game design? How can you use information that passes between potentially between projects, and what can that information become? That's getting really interesting to me. And I love marketplaces. Like, man, go give me a good marketplace full of assets. I can kit bash a new piece of artwork and a new theme very quickly. Give me a marketplace full of different ideas, and you're giving me a playground of cool characters and themes and stuff to start creating content with. So I
Yeah, and
really,
smart contracts and like basically, you're talking about like a marketplace of design interactions, kind
yeah,
of.
that's exactly it. It's god damn, making games is hard, man. It's really is. Anyone who's ever actually worked on a game will contest to the fact that doing basic stuff well is difficult.
Yeah,
And this idea that you can assemble a really cool experience. Like you're going to do a bunch of your own stuff, but to be able to pick up a really cool idea and integrate that in and know that there's an audience ready to go on the other side of that. There's an audience that's already playing with that idea and who is more inclined to play your game because you've integrated it. That's, for a first time developer in particular, that's the hardest freaking part already addressed, is how do you get people to engage with
yeah,
your stuff?
yeah. That's a really interesting sort of subject area because I've been thinking for a while. I mean, making games is hard. It's harder to make a game than it is to make an NFT, right?
Yeah.
And right now we're at the intersection of gaming and crypto technology and smart contracts. And there are people out there that are making the NFT side and the smart contract side even easier to deal with. And so I'm very much of the opinion that the game devs who really understand the science and the art of fun and not just extrinsic reward but intrinsic reward, like
Mm,
game devs who they've got some games under their belt, they know how to do this, they know how to find the fun in a design.
yeah.
If like those devs who come to this space will very much be the winners in this space, and yet there's still so much reluctance. I know this, it's about 50-50, but according to the polls that I've seen, but there still seems to be a lot of people who are just determined to not, they don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. Well,
um,
like I said, it's gonna be like that right up until it's not. And it is honestly the best it will ever be for the people who are going to step into this space. And you can never have a more golden opportunity because you don't have any competitors. It's
yeah,
the bar is pretty low. You just have to make a good game. You don't have to make the best game. You don't have to make a triple A game. You don't like Again, 2008, the first indie games were okay. I love Jonathan Blow to death. Braid drove me up the wall. Like it's the first games were okay, but they're not, as good as the games that are being made today. They just had to be good enough. They had to be interesting. And so that's the people coming into this space now. It's the same. It's a beautiful opportunity because you get to as Wild West, you get to define yourself. You get to define what a game in this space looks and acts like. There's no headcanon yet. All we've
Yeah,
got is
it's
some
going to be the
yeah.
ones, the ones who don't care about sort of what the cool kids club is saying,
Mm.
and just say, cool, I'm just going to go build stuff,
Yeah, I'm just gonna make a
and
game.
I'm going to define what this is by what I build. And like, yeah, as you said, it's a low bar at the moment. There's still like the games that are out there, the games that are making it really big at the moment are like versions 0.001 of like what a fun game
Totally.
can be in the space, right? Like if you look at Axie, if you look at like Thetan Arena and some of the others that are, have like so much investment behind them and stuff. Um, yeah, it's like real game designers with real teams are going to blow them out of the water. I think it's already starting
Oh
to happen a
man.
little bit. Like I think
Yeah.
with Alluvium, I don't know if you know Alluvium, but
No, I don't. I'm
um,
gonna Google it though.
there's another local team, Australian team. Um, I think the main thing that they did right was they just picked the right scope, right? They said, this is the size of our team. And this is another thing that, storied like veteran game makers, they know about scope. They know how to target the right scope.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I think Alluvium did really well. They said like, this is the size of our team. We think we can make an auto battler.
Yeah.
It's a fun, addictive formula. It's easier to develop than a lot of other genres.
I'm
That's
looking,
that's
yeah,
just the right
it's
scope.
smart. It's a smart way to develop a good product. It looks really
Yeah,
cool. I'm looking at it now. It looks awesome.
and I got so addicted to like Dota Underlords and those kinds of it's a really really replayable formula for a game. Um, so I mean it's already kind of starting to happen a little bit. I
Yeah.
just it's we're in this weird space where it's like I would love to have more true like game makers who've been around who understand this sort of game design stuff that we're talking about. I'd
Yeah.
love to have them along for the ride. At the same time, the crypto space doesn't need them, but I'd love to have them. you
Yeah.
know?
No, 100%. Like um, they're going to make the interesting things that will last long beyond whatever the bubble is. Like I don't think any of the other stuff is going to ever go away. Like people still
Of
spend
course.
ridiculous amounts of money on tennis shoes. They still trade trading cards. We're going to have NFT as weird thing for rich people to spend money on for forever. It's always going to be there. But in the same way that that's always going to be there over there, and rich people do strange things over in that corner, the rest of us are going to be working on and creating and sharing really cool games. So yeah, so I'm really, I don't know how we catch them and get them involved,
Yeah,
but I'm hoping
that's
that there's
that's a
people out
tricky one.
there that read Otherland and Snow Crash, and they got inspired as kids like I did, and I hope that there's other people out there who maybe they played tabletop, and they've always wondered how they can create a living world in a digital game the same way you could with tabletop. And this is probably one of the closest mediums that we've ever had if you just use it right. So yeah, it's maybe we have to wait 15 years like VR did before it actually gets picked up by the right people. Hopefully not. But yeah, hopefully a couple of bright-eyed, bushy-tailed young developers with old veteran developers get together and make something cool.
I think we've got advantages over VR. I think we might move
Uh,
faster than VR because there's such a barrier to entry with just the headset. You have to pay for it. You have
yeah.
to be okay with that environment for like longer than 15 minutes. uh, Developing for this technology is easier than developing for VR technology. And I
Yes.
also think that there's a kind of a proven use case, and I'm sure some people will disagree with me on this, but I see the Steam marketplace as sort of like proof of concept that people want this kind of
Yeah.
like an item marketplace. They want expanded abilities on that. They want expanded functionality on that. And they like it's almost even a proof of concept of play to earn, except it's just a really bad version of it because like
Hmm.
Valve, they take their cut, whether it's I think it I read somewhere it was 15% of every transaction. I'm not sure if that's still accurate, but it can be much lower than that on blockchain systems.
Yeah.
So when you take that cut, I mean, right now, if you go play a game of Counter Strike or something like that, occasionally you will get an item just for playing, but it is the absolute dirt tier item. It's worth nothing. It's 2 cents. The cost of transferring it to someone becomes equal to the cost of what they would
Yeah.
give you. It's like literally 2 cents, 3 cents. So it's kind of pointless to do that. It's pointless. See, like, why did I even get this item? I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to transfer it. But when that portion of the transaction fee is passed on to players and developers,
Yeah.
all of a sudden it's acknowledging the value that non-paying players contribute to a multiplayer system.
Yeah.
And that I'm very much okay with. That I'm very
Yeah.
much okay with, like having the paying players, but also like if you're the best player in the world at a game and you're paying money, it's still like if the server's empty, then you're not having fun, right?
Yeah.
So the people who are bad at the game and not paying and or they're new or whatever, they're still providing value to the system. It's just acknowledging that value.
Oh, it's we are obviously valuable. Like our eyeballs and our time within a game is valuable. Like we are the thing that attracts sponsors. We are the thing that attracts hello that attracts all monetization. And it's to get build, like I said, a ecosystem and space around us, to acknowledge us, keeps us as well. The developer who builds that system around our presence and our eyeballs and the way we play and play to or whatever it is, also can keep those players. You will, it's easy enough to find like cryptozombies.io, which is a free tutorial to build your first Ethereum blockchain game.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and like within a few minutes, there's a Udemy course on it. There's a book, and the ability to build Ethereum blockchain and start testing out prototypes is very, very, very. It's not going to take very long at all. So basically,
yeah.
I take everything that's currently in spreadsheets on my computer, and it's just distributed data and ideas and how
That
it might
old
connect.
game,
Oh yeah,
the spreadsheet game.
the Excel, the game designed by Excel.
I know it
And
well.
then now I start building up prototypes, and so that's for me
That's
next
cool.
steps.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we've been sort of sending around that crypto zombies thing as an example of a really good tutorial that we kind of want to copy when we want to make something similar for Efinity and the paratoken standard that's going to be on Polkadot.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a great idea. Definitely do something like that. So it'll get, if you want more developers going into the ecosystem, give them those little gateway drugs. The make your first game with this technology really, really easy, and make a good one. And
yeah, we
just
really
that's
need
the
it.
biggest hurdle.
It's probably going to involve me and a few other people who actually understand the tech a lot better than I do, and me being the content person. Um, yeah,
Start running
but
game
I think
jams.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's another thing we really want to do. So I mean, it's a tricky sort of space because like I mean, what was the recent? It was at the Global Game Jam that there was a bit of a backlash because it had a crypto sponsor, um, and that I think like if I think it would be good to host game jams that emphasize the more positive, like experimental game design
Mm,
sides of what the tech can do. Uh, but also, like when you're targeting game devs who are interested in using the tech, it's the same community as the skeptics. Like you're not going to be
yeah.
able to hit one without hitting the other in terms of like targeting them and saying, "Hey, we're hosting this thing."
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're going to get backlash. You just have to weather it. Um,
You're gonna get
and
it no matter what you do.
let the examples at the end of it sort of speak for themselves.
Well, there's also the mega grants route. Like one of the best things Unreal's ever done for itself, obviously, is opening up the mega grant program. And one of its requirements is you have to demonstrate that what you're making hasn't already been done. So you have to demonstrate that you're adding something new to the development community, that you're adding some kind of, it's a new technique, new technology, new kind of, it's a new medium, a new product. But you need to demonstrate that you can't Google and find exactly the same thing somewhere else. You also have to demonstrate that you're already contributing to the community. You have to already be feeding into the network and into the body of knowledge, and show that that's already happening within that process of the mega grant. And what they've done by doing that is they've cut through all of the, I just want some seed funding, man. I just want some money. They've just cut through all of that bullshit, and they know that they're going to get people who are already actively talking to each other. They're already developing connections with other developers and building up audiences. So you're getting the kind of people you want through the door by the nature of the restrictions that you've put on the grant application process. So Engine could be doing something very similar, where they say, okay, we're going to put together this little development fund for game developers, but your project cannot monetize NFTs. Like it cannot.
Oh, that's interesting.
So your project must not monetize NFTs. It has to be game design, experiential, player experience only. Go.
Wow.
You do that.
I love it.
And so it's
I love,
yeah.
our minds are, yeah. I love it because my mind is very much like your mind in this, in loving that type of thing. We do actually have a $100 million metaverse fund.
Oh, cool.
So I guess you could say the hard part's already been done, in that we've already set aside the money.
Yeah.
I don't think it's, I'm not sure what restrictions or like what sort of guidelines currently exist around, how it'll be judged and who gets that and how people apply. I think it's all super early stage.
Yeah.
But I really like where your head's at. And the sort of, it sounds like you were saying that was from Unreal.
So from Unreal and Epic, they're the ones who were kind of like, okay, we're going to restrict this so that you have to demonstrate that you're already the kind of developer that we want to support. So the nature of the application is going to reveal that you are already contributing to community, you are already contributing to knowledge base, and that goodness, and that those are socks for me. Thank you very much. I've got socks now.
Oh, you gotta have socks.
Yeah. These socks have, oh, thank you. They're matching socks even, which is really for an 18-month-old. That's something else. I'm putting them on. She worked so hard to get them to me. But
that's the first item on the resume. At 18 months.
Can match socks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's slow down, darling. Slow down, Bradley. Can you come get her, darling? So it's put in your restrictions, basically a funnel, which is going to make it so that the kind of people that you want populating the ecosystem at the end are the ones who are going to get through. And by coming out and saying, okay, you can apply for this multi-million-dollar grant, but your game design, we want you to design around non-fungible tokens. We want you to design around Ethereum, around blockchain, around Engine, but it cannot be monetized. Like what you're designing must have nothing to do with monetization. We all know that it's going to be monetized later. We all know you're going to get paid. Come on, let's we know that you're going to get money off of this, but we just want to see your creative minds applied to game design and player experience design, and what you would do with this. How the fuck could anybody say you guys are in any way like the other species of NFT?
It's very hard to marry that with the corporate dystopian nightmare that skeptics are sort of putting forward.
They're going to start calling you hippies.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, if they knew me, if only they knew me.
We're just going to call
it's called a metaverse fund. So making it contribute to the metaverse is the most natural thing. And it's something that we talk about a lot as well, which is, every company that's announcing a metaverse right now has their own definition for it. from Disney to Nvidia to Facebook. And then none of them are really mutually exclusive, but obviously
they're all still silos.
yeah, like ours is very different in that like we don't even envision having control over it at all. Like we want it to be community governed, completely decentralized, pieces plugging into pieces, all built by the community for the community, and votes regularly taken by the amount of affinity that people have in their wallet. Um,
Well,
yeah, so
that's getting to again, that I'm like, God, when did Otherland come out? The metaverse that he imagined, that's exactly what it was. Like done right, this environment should embarrass you at some point. Like at some point, the metaverse should go in a direction that you never planned for, and
interesting.
you can't necessarily step in and go, no, 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 this isn't what we envisioned. Wipe it. You shouldn't be able to. It should be able to evolve into its own thing. You will get a 4chan of the metaverse, but then you're also going to get the gift economy. Like you'll get what you see, the sort of nature of gifts and stuff. You'll start to see that develop as well. So you'll start to see all kinds of things. So the Otherland books came out in like 1996. So he was envisioning a online sort of connective tissue between game worlds and products, that these things all kind of hooked into, and players were the things that transfer data between these. And it was
Sounds like I'm gonna have to read it.
I really think it's going to fit in with a lot of what you're thinking.
I've never read Snow Crash as well, so I've got a lot of metaverse reading to do.
Snow Crash is much more in the corporate dystopian, like the fact that it gets referenced all the time by the corporate dystopians is not surprising at all. Whereas Tad Williams is very much more of the adventure fantasy. This is your Ready Player One. This is a metaverse world built by a gamer for gamers kind of thing.
Okay, I read Ready Player One. I didn't much care for it.
It's Ready Player One is the kitsch 80s loving version of this. But yeah, check out those books, and yeah, have a think about how you can maybe shake up the conversation around NFT design and get it as far away from investment as you can, because we can all talk about monetization later. We can talk about how to make a living off of this after we open up the discussion of how to use it in interesting design ways. There was a game design, I guess an experience design professor at Carnegie Mellon many years ago. And he's the guy behind The Last Lecture, which is an incredibly moving piece that makes me cry every time I watch it. And he ran a program in the 90s. He's a programmer. He ran a program with a pure hippie artist, and it was a VR program, which became hugely successful. Some of the greatest engineers and artists at the time were going through this program, and their whole requirement was, okay, you're going to make a game, but you can have no shooting violence, no blood, and no death. And so basically everything games was at in the 90s. This is, you couldn't, you didn't have a game without those things. And they ended up just getting these incredibly creative and innovative projects being developed by just making that one restriction. So restrictions are powerful. We don't use them often enough, and they encourage growth. They encourage the kind of professional and creative growth that you might want to see. So a carefully crafted restriction is actually a powerful tool.
That's amazing. Yeah, restrictions breed creativity, and when you've got $100 million metaverse fund, you have the power to motivate with that creativity. I want to make sure I'm getting the note right. Last lecture was what you were
the
talking
last
about?
lecture, and that's so. I'll send that through, and he's not with us anymore. So it's Randy Pausch, and he was a engineering programming teacher at Carnegie Mellon. And the last lecture it's a series that was run by Carnegie Mellon, where they invite professors to basically deliver what would be the last lecture. If you found out you're going to die, this is your last lecture.
Right.
Only it was his last lecture. Like it actually,
wow.
he knew it was going to be, so he put literally the best he possibly could into it. And it's incredibly moving piece in terms of design, creativity, empowering people to follow their dreams, like really, really empowering people to find out what their dreams are and make them happen. And following your own dreams, like how important it is to whatever your childhood dream was, make it a reality, actually go do it, and to have a fulfilling life in that respect. And then of course this really cool creative program that is I think now still running long after his death.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Yeah, I've been keen to. I mean, obviously keen in terms of like, I think when we talk to the two different communities of people, we need different communication strategies. Crypto natives versus gaming natives. The people are interested in different things.
Totally different
So
things.
from that sort of business perspective, like there's I want to use different language and talk about different things, but also just from a personal interest perspective. I'm how long have I reviewed games, right? And when I
Yes. You've been doing this for
when
a
I
while.
like when I load up a page for a game and all it talks about is tokenomics and investment opportunities, and there's a wallet connector, and it hasn't even told me what genre the game
Uh-huh.
is yet, or like anything about that. Like it's not just something that happens in the crypto space, by the way. Like I remember times when I was writing for game websites, and I would spend a certain amount of time, five minutes maybe, just trying to find out what kind of game the game is.
Yeah.
And this is not a crypto game, this is a normal game. And if I'm like, if I go to your Steam page, if I go to your website, if I go to your socials, if I watch a trailer on YouTube and I still don't know what genre the game is, you've failed me. Right? You've failed me, you've failed the user. And I actually think I'm generous with the amount of time that I would spend just trying to find out about
Yeah,
this
the fact
thing.
that you're still actually trying to
um
find an answer when most players
yeah.
would literally just they'd already have been moved on.
Yeah, and game writers too. I mean, if they're spending 30 seconds
Mm.
checking your website trying to find out more about your game, and you've got a bunch of copy that gave them no clue, or you had a game trailer that was I it's hard because I don't want to denigrate. Like, I know a lot of effort goes into these trailers, but if it's 100% pre-rendered and there's no idea of gameplay at all, then that games writer is going to click the X in the window and not return to that,
Totally.
and you've missed out on the opportunity for coverage. So I see that mistake repeated, and it's almost like the effect is tenfold in the crypto space, because you're hit with a wallet connector, you're hit with investment stuff, um, and this is not how we drive adoption. This is not how we get
No,
gamers.
no, it's
Yeah,
not how you get gamers. It's how you get investors, and it's how you get weird rich people. But it's not how you get
yeah,
gamers.
it's how you inflate a bubble.
Yeah,
But
totally. And let's
and
not play in the bubble. Let's just like let's we know what's gonna pop. Let's just not operate there.
yeah, yeah. While people are playing bubble games, we can be building the fun games
100%.
and the games that'll last. Those will be the games that'll last. I mean, even like there are some crypto natives who get it. Like, I saw Sam Bankman-Fried was making this exact point as well. He was saying, like, it's harder to make a game than it is to make an NFT. So game makers coming into the space, they're going to be the ones who last. If there is a bubble that pops, nobody can predict the future, but like in 2021, late 2021, gaming and metaverse coins and tokens, they were skyrocketing. If all of that drops and goes to shit, it's going to be the ones that are genuinely fun to play and that are
Yeah,
offering genuinely new experiences that last, and they provide extreme resilience
yeah.
to this kind of thing.
And look at the games which are, they're games that came out 15 years ago, and you've got people making mods for them today, and you've got people making emulators for them today, and because they were just good games. A gamer, the gaming community is just a few short steps away from becoming game developers themselves. So, these good games basically spawn the people who are going to maintain them, and maintain their franchise. And yeah, it's you've got the folks who are building systems for games tokens, which are entirely driven by financial at the moment. They just see players as money, and that's all it is to them. And at the moment, they're doing okay because there's so few games to play, and the promise of being able to take something from one game to the other is such a huge pull, and these early adopter gamers are basically willing to be they're basically willing to be used in return for being able to play something that doesn't exist. It's not anywhere else. They can't play it anywhere else. It's just such a new experience. That the person who comes around and creates something genuinely interesting and enjoyable is gonna get them, and is gonna
Yeah.
keep them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's, I don't know how we convince more game devs to do it, but I think seeing people like yourself in a, I guess I haven't said congratulations yet, but in a creative director role. So
Hey,
congratulations for that.
thank you.
Um, and the stuff that we've been talking about, if you're leading Skunkworks stuff, I mean, how can you deny that's like indie AF? Like
Yeah,
that's exactly what we want to see.
yeah, and it's and I'm not like I'm not even the best person to be doing this. I am I'm freaking out in a creative director role. I'm came from an art
Well, I
background,
wasn't going
and
to say anything, but
right, oh, you can see it in my
no,
eyes, you can see it in my eyes. I'm freaking out, man. But I came from an
you're the
art
exact right
background.
person.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. But someone who comes in with proper programming chops, they're gonna kill it. They're
I
gonna
know a
kill it.
few. I
Yeah,
know a few working on some. I know a few working on some secret projects that are exciting, and I have also, at the same time, on the complete other side of the coin, have heard some wacky stories about investment stuff, and like it's happening on both sides. I think there's some really cool stuff game
yeah,
design wise that's going to come out, and at the same time on the other side, wow, like have I heard of stories of like Unity store asset arrangements that
yeah,
investors like large scale investors they know what they are and still invest anyway because in that current market in the late 2021 market they were like it's probably going to 20x anyway. So
yeah.
that side of it is just silly. And I'm not even looking at it too much, but yeah.
Let it all crash, like let that all crash and burn. It's gonna do its thing. Like there's gonna be a forest fire. Seasons pass or be a forest fire. Things will go up in blazes. And you just keep making stuff. Um, just
That's the
just
highlight, that's the clip, just keep making stuff.
just keep making stuff. The ones who make good stuff are gonna win in the long run. It's look at the rise of house music and MCs and DJs, and at some point got picked up by corporate sponsors and got flooded with a lot of bullshit. And the ones who are still around were the ones who just made great shit, and they just made great shit consistently. They're the ones who had the biggest lasting impact on the medium. And you're going to get the same thing here. So I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Who
I
do
had
you
a
want to
funny
attract?
journey through dubstep in that way.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to admit that Skrillex brought me to dubstep,
Hey,
but
whoever gets you there
then
gets you
like
there.
yeah, I through that I discovered what some people would call real dubstep,
Yeah.
like the more minimal stuff that was around before Skrillex, and now I absolutely love that stuff. It's just that yeah,
Hey,
I
whatever
had the
gets you
weird
there,
path of
whatever gets you there gets you there.
yeah. Well, this has been great.
Cool. Yeah,
I
I know I
very
really
much
enjoyed this as
appreciate
well.
yeah,